Good evening, Professor Cooper, Psychology of Women, fellow Psychology of Women students, my peers. I'm going to talk about a difficult subject this evening, and it's one that gets to be talked about more. There are a lot of people who are suffering, and many, I would say most people, don't think about it or don't even know about it. Imagine you have a close friend, a female friend, and she tells you she has a new boyfriend, and this boyfriend is very controlling. He makes threats to her often. He makes decisions for her, and he's very unpredictable. She finds herself being scared of him often, and more so as time goes on. And this is a dear friend of yours you've known through college. And she tells you recently that she found a hole in her trunk. Looks like someone had just drilled a hole in it. And now imagine this is the last time you'll ever hear from her. This is how many people are human trafficked as well as sex trafficked. This is a topic that is quite a bit hush hush. And the definition of a sex slave, actually, the definition of a human trafficked person is modern day slave. And within that category, there's many forms. Forced labor, and sex slave is one of them. A sex slave is someone who's forced to engage in sexual acts against their will, and they can't leave or have been mentally coerced not to leave. They're handlers, they're traffickers. This is a $150 billion a year industry, human trafficking. And of that, 99 billion of it is for commercial sexual exploitation. And by commercial, it means that it's organized and done on a large scale, generally speaking, and it's done for money rather than trade. 71% are women and girls, and 29% are men and boys. Oftentimes, people are not just grabbed and drugged and put a hood over their head and thrown in the back of a car or truck. That does happen quite a bit, but many times it's done more insidiously and we don't notice it. It's someone who's of a vulnerable population, usually maybe they're poor, they have low self-esteem, maybe they were abused as a child, they may speak a different language, they may have been brought here from another country. Oftentimes they're minors, and we'll get to that in a moment. And many have mental health issues that allow them to be victimized more easily. And so sometimes they work in crews, the traffickers, and they will slowly over time pick their targets and make the other person, make the victim seem as though they're crazy or paranoid or, on drugs. And they sometimes even go as far as to pay off lawyers and judges and police. The numbers on this are a little fuzzy from my research, in order to keep that person from getting help. And sometimes people dress up and pretend that they're police and, at the right moment or whatever to make that happen. Some of the indications are the person appears to have had a lot of trauma. They're fearful of police. They think their family's in danger. They say they owe a lot of money that they can't pay back. They don't have a passport or someone else is holding the passport for them. They make little to no money, even though they work long hours in, intense fields. And they may feel that other outside forces are controlling them, which then tips off people to think that they have maybe schizophrenia or other paranoia disorders. And they're usually people are lured in under the threat of violence and manipulation through the previous tactics I just discussed. And sometimes it's with the promise of a really high-paying job or a beautiful romantic life in another country. about 15 to 50,000 women and children are forced into some sort of trafficking in the United States alone each year. The numbers in total are hard to nail down because it's such an underreported crime. And many of those in the US are from Mexico and the Philippines. It's estimated by the UN that 20 to 40 million slaves exist in the world today under trafficking. And over half of known reported cases in the US specifically are of children, just over around 51%. And so some of the aspects of human trafficking at large, and how money is made by these criminals is through forced labor. Again, some of them could be from another country where they made pennies anyway. So to them, that might not be a huge noticeable change, especially when it's done with progression over time and manipulation, where the person accepts their fate almost, or sees it as normal and the brain gets adjusted to it. It could be done for the purposes of marriage, sold off to a rich oligarch in another country. Prostitution, of course, sex slave trade, as we just talked about, and even organ harvesting. And there's more, of course. So we hear, we've only heard from an estimated 0.04%. 0.04%, that's vastly lower than 1%, of survivors that that are children who've made it out. That most of them came from foster care, a large number of them, and a large number of them were recruited / abducted, manipulated. Thought they were making a choice on their own and ended up in a place where they couldn't get out of. On the average, they were between 10 and 14 years old, and many of those were abused girls who ran away from whatever their situation was. Maybe it was in foster care, but maybe it was, their legal parent or guardian. And we have found more and more that the traffickers themselves have been advertising a lot more on social media and through the internet to sell their services, so to speak, or their black market commerce in their criminal activities to make more money. So what do we do? Well, what can be done about this? Awareness in talking about it. What we're doing right now is one of the best ways. Billboards, online ads, in the airports, we're talking about, where people start to say, I'm sorry, what is this? Trafficking? They're slaves still? I thought slavery was illegal. And it gets the conversation going. The more we know about it, the more we're curious, because we think, how could anyone be a slave? That's ridiculous. And it gets us to think a little bit more about it and ask more questions and dig a little deeper. And then we can see the signs and we know what to look for. And, the signs that I shared earlier specifically get to be understood altogether, because just because someone's, exhibiting a few of these doesn't mean that they're being trafficked, but it's important that we think about it at least. Call the police. Call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, 888-373-7888. Contact Hope for Justice. Contact Free the Slaves or Polaris Project. Always talk about it. Always report it. And another thing that I think societally can be done, and many people are talking about this, is to make sex work legal. That way, people have sovereignty over their own choices. And just like with making cannabis legal, anytime something's illegal, it's in the black market, it's handled as a crime. And this gives sex workers protection under the law. It gives them legal recourse. It gives them health benefits, safety under tax codes, and it's by choice. And so we can allow people to make their own free choice and not be slaves. Thank you for hearing me. And let's move forward by sharing this conversation and helping those that don't have a voice.